The wagon wheels groaned against the rutted trail, each jolt sending sharp pain through Cora Mae Arlington's spine. She kept her back straight anyway, clutching the worn leather satchel that held everything she owned, her mother's Bible, a folding knife with a bone handle, and $3 silver she'd saved from her nursing work back in Kansas. 25 years old and unmarried. In Kansas, they'd started calling her a spinster behind her back, whispering about the tall woman who'd spent too many years tending to the sick instead of finding a husband. Now she was being sent west like a package, payment for a debt she hadn't incurred. "You'll want to fix that posture of yours when you meet him, Mrs." Harwick said from across the wagon bed. The older woman had appointed herself as Cora's advisor for the journey, though Cora hadn't asked for guidance. "Mr. Knox don't take kindly to prideful women, likes them meek and willing." Cora said nothing, watching the endless prairie grass bend under the October wind. 3 weeks ago, her father had lost their farm in a card game. The man who won it, Jebediah Knox, a rancher from Wyoming Territory, had offered a trade, cancel the debt in exchange for a bride. "I done him a favor, really," her father had said, not meeting her eyes. "Man needs a wife out there, and you ain't getting any younger." The other woman in the wagon, barely 17 and headed to marry a shopkeeper in Cheyenne, giggled nervously. "I heard Mr. Knox owns near 3,000 head of cattle. You'll be living like a queen." "Queens don't get traded for gambling debts," Cora replied quietly. "Mrs." Harwick's face pinched. "You'd best lose that sharp tongue before tonight, Mr. Knox expects his bride to be accommodating, first night and all. Man's been widowed near 2 years. He'll be wanting his rights." The words sat heavy in Cora's stomach. She'd nursed enough women after difficult childbirths to know what marriage meant. But those women had chosen their husbands, spoken vows in churches with flowers in their hair, not been bartered away to settle a poker debt. "My Sarah went to a man in Montana last spring, Mrs." Harwick continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Cried something fierce the first week, but she writes now that she's settled. Got a baby on the way. That's what women do, we adjust." Cora touched the knife through the leather of her satchel. Her mother had carried it from Ohio to Kansas 20 years ago, tucked in her boot. "For protection," she'd said, though she'd never explained from what. Now Cora understood. The wagon driver, a leathery man named Emmett, called back. "Should reach Pine Ridge Station by sundown. Mr. Knox said he'd meet us there." Pine Ridge Station. Cora had never heard of it until 3 weeks ago. Now it would be her home, or her prison, depending on how you looked at it. She'd studied what maps she could find a trading post, a few scattered ranches, mountains to the west and nothing but grass to the east. The edge of civilization. Some called it the perfect place for a man to do as he pleased with no one to intervene. "You ever been married, Miss Arlington?" the young bride-to-be asked, trying to make conversation. "No." "Oh, well, my mama told me what to expect. Said it hurts at first, but—" "Hush, child." Mrs. Harwick interrupted. "Miss Arlington was a nurse. I'm sure she knows about such matters." Cora had indeed seen enough. Women with bruises they claimed came from falling. Girls barely older than children. Bellies swollen with babies they didn't want. She'd held their hands, cleaned their wounds, kept their secrets, and now she was heading toward the same fate, dressed in her best blue calico that was still travel-stained and 3 years out of fashion. The sun climbed higher, burning the morning chill from the air. They stopped at a creek to water the horses, and Cora climbed down to stretch her legs. Her height had always been a burden. 5 feet and 9 inches made her tower over most women and meet many men eye to eye. Her mother had told her to be proud of it, that God didn't make mistakes. But her mother had died before seeing how the world treated women who didn't fit in the proper box. "He knows you're tall," the young girl asked, approaching Cora by the water. The marriage broker mentioned it. Maybe he likes tall women. Maybe his first wife was tall. Cora doubted it. Men who had to buy wives through poker debts weren't usually particular about preferences. They wanted someone to cook, clean, bear children, and warm their beds. The rest was inconsequential. By late afternoon, the landscape began to change. The flat prairie gave way to rolling hills dotted with pine and cottonwood. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks already white with early snow. It was beautiful country. Cora had to admit, wild and untamed, like something out of the adventure novels she'd read as a girl, back when she'd dreamed of different futures. "There it is," Emmett called out. "Pine Ridge Station." Cora leaned forward to look. A cluster of log buildings huddled in a valley, smoke rising from their chimneys. She could make out a large barn, several corrals filled with horses, and what might be a general store. Men moved between the buildings, their shapes small as ants from this distance. "Now remember, Mrs.," Harwick said, fussing with her bonnet. "First impressions matter. Smile, but not too much. Speak when spoken to. And for heaven's sake, don't mention that nursing business. Men don't like wives who've seen too much of the world." Cora wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, as if she could pretend to be some sheltered girl who'd never seen blood or death or the cruel things people did to each other. But she kept quiet, watching the station grow larger as they descended into the valley. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the largest building. Men emerged from doorways, their faces curious. Cora searched for the one who might be Knox, but they all looked the same from here, weathered, bearded, dressed in work clothes and carrying the smell of cattle and sweat. Then one separated from the group. He was older than she'd expected, maybe 45, with iron-gray hair and a face carved by wind and sun. His clothes were finer than the others, a black vest over a clean shirt, boots that had seen polish recently. When he looked up at the wagon, his eyes went straight to her. "That's him, Mrs.," Harwick whispered. "That's Mr. Knox." Cora's hands tightened on her satchel as the man approached. He didn't smile, didn't offer a greeting, just studied her like she was livestock he was considering purchasing, which, she supposed, wasn't far from the truth. "Miss Arlington," he said finally. His voice was flat, giving nothing away. "You're late. I expected you yesterday." "The wagon lost a wheel near Fort Laramie," Emmett explained, but Knox silenced him with a look. "I wasn't addressing you." He turned back to Cora. "Can you speak for yourself? Or do I need to worry about that too?" "I can speak," Cora said, meeting his gaze. A flicker of something annoyance crossed his features. "Good. Get your things. We've wasted enough daylight?" He turned and walked toward a waiting horse without offering to help her down from the wagon. The message was clear she was on her own. Cora gathered her satchel and climbed down unassisted, her legs stiff from the long ride. The young bride-to-be watched with wide eyes, suddenly looking grateful for her shopkeeper. "Mrs." Harwick pursed her lips but said nothing. "Your trunk?" Knox asked, already mounted on his horse. "This is all I have," Cora said, indicating her satchel. He frowned. "I paid for a proper wife, not a beggar." The words stung, but Cora kept her face neutral. "You paid a gambling debt. This is what you got." Several of the watching men chuckled, but Knox's expression darkened. "Get on the spare horse. We've got an hour's ride to the ranch." Cora looked at the horse, a raw-boned mare with suspicious eyes. She'd ridden before, but not often, and never in skirts. But she'd be damned if she'd show weakness now. She approached the horse carefully, spoke to it softly, and managed to mount with some dignity intact. "You know what's expected tonight?" Knox asked once she was settled. Heat flooded her face, but she kept her voice steady. "Mrs." Harwick was quite thorough in her explanations. "Good. I don't have patience for maiden fears. My first wife understood her duties. I expect the same from you." With that, he spurred his horse forward, not waiting to see if she followed. Cora took one last look at the wagon, At the young girl who would at least have a wedding ceremony. At Mrs. Harwick, who was already turning away. Then she urged her horse after Knox, riding toward whatever waited at the ranch. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky red as blood. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and Cora touched her satchel again, feeling the outline of her mother's knife. For protection, her mother had said. Cora was beginning to understand exactly what she'd meant. The wagon wheel splintered with a crack that echoed off the canyon walls. Cora felt the vehicle lurch sideways, throwing her hard against the wooden side. Her satchel flew from her lap, spilling her mother's Bible into the dust. "Damn it all to hell," Emmett cursed, jumping down to inspect the damage. They were 3 hours out from Pine Ridge Station, deep in a narrow pass with the walls of red rock rising on either side. The October sun had already dipped low, casting long shadows across the trail. Knox dismounted his horse with controlled anger in every movement. "How long to fix it?" Emmett crouched by the broken wheel, shaking his head. "Axles cracked clean through. I'll need to ride back to the station for parts and help. Won't be back before morning." "Morning." Knox's voice could have frozen water. "I'm not spending the night out here with—" He gestured toward Cora without looking at her. "Got no choice," Emmett said, standing and dusting off his hands. "Unless you want to leave the lady here alone while we ride back." "I'll be fine," Cora said, climbing down from the tilted wagon. She retrieved her Bible and knife, checking both for damage. "I've spent nights outdoors before." Knox finally looked at her, his gray eyes cold. "Not in these mountains. You haven't— wolves, bears, and worse come through this pass." "Worse?" Cora asked, though she suspected she knew. "Outlaws and drifters use these hidden canyons too." A sound interrupted Knox's reply, the ring of horseshoes on stone, coming from the direction they'd been heading. Both men tensed, hands moving to their weapons. Cora instinctively stepped behind the wagon, clutching her satchel. A lone rider emerged from the shadows between the canyon walls. He sat easy in the saddle, like he'd been born there, one hand resting casual on his thigh. As he drew closer, Cora could make out Detail's broad shoulders under a worn leather coat, dark hair that needed cutting, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't covered in several days' worth of stubble. "Evening, folks," the stranger said, pulling up about 20 feet away. His voice was deep but quiet, like he was used to not raising it. "Heard the crack from up the trail. Wagon trouble." "Nothing that concerns you," Knox said sharply. "Move along." The stranger's eyes, they were green. Cora noticed. Green as spring grass shifted to the broken wagon, then to Emmett, finally settling on Cora. He touched the brim of his hat slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than flourish. "Ma'am," he said simply, then looked back at Knox. "Canyon gets mighty cold after dark. There's a clearing about a quarter-mile up with better shelter. Old pine grove, protected from the wind." "We don't need your help," Knox insisted. The stranger shrugged, leather coat creaking. "Wasn't offering it to you." His gaze returned to Cora. "Ma'am, you need fire or water first." The question was so unexpected, so practically kind, that Cora found herself answering before Knox could intervene. "Water, please, if you have any to spare." The stranger dismounted in one fluid movement. He was taller than she'd expected, maybe 6 feet and some inches. From his saddlebags, he produced a canteen and walked toward her, stopping a respectful distance away to hand it over. His hands were scarred from work, but clean. "Name's Asa Callahan," he said quietly, meant for her ears more than the men's. "I've got a camp set up in that clearing. You're welcome to it." "She's not going anywhere with you," Knox snarled, hand now resting on his pistol. "This is my bride, and don't recall asking you." Asa cut him off, but his tone stayed mild. He looked at Cora again. "Your choice, ma'am, but that wagon's not moving tonight, and this pass gets down near freezing. Seen men lose fingers to frostbite trying to tough it out. Cora took a drink from the canteen. The water was cool and clean, then handed it back. Mr. Knox, perhaps we should consider— We're not considering anything. Knox said. He turned to Emmett. Ride back for help. I'll stay here with her. Emmett looked uncomfortable. Mr. Knox, if this man's got a proper camp set up— I said ride back, Knox commanded. Emmett shrugged, untied one of the horses from the wagon, and mounted up. I'll be back by mid-morning, good Lord willing. He gave Cora an apologetic look before spurring the horse back down the trail. Asa Callahan watched him go, then started gathering deadwood from around the canyon floor. He worked methodically, ignoring Knox's glare, piling the wood near a flat area protected by an overhang of rock. What do you think you're doing? Knox demanded. Making a fire, Asa replied, not looking up. Unless you prefer the lady freezes. I can build a fire. I'm sure you can. Asa struck a match, coaxing the kindling to life. Question is, will you— The two men stared at each other across the growing flames. Cora recognized the tension she'd seen it in field hospitals when soldiers from different units crossed paths. Male pride and territory. With her as the prize neither had actually won. Mr. Callahan, she said, breaking the silence. Thank you for the water and the fire. We appreciate your kindness. He nodded, adding larger pieces of wood to the flames. Got coffee in my saddlebags if you'd like some. And some jerky and hardtack. She doesn't need your charity. Knox snapped. Wasn't offering charity, Asa said mildly. Just being neighborly. He looked at Cora. Trail gets lonely. Sometimes sharing a meal makes it easier. There was something in the way he said it, not pitying or presumptuous, just matter of fact that made Cora's chest tight. When was the last time someone had offered her something without expecting payment? I'd appreciate some coffee, she said, earning another glare from Knox. Asa produced a battered pot and coffee grounds from his saddlebags. He worked efficiently, setting up a tripod over the fire, measuring grounds with practiced ease. Knox made a show of checking his weapons and the wagon, but Cora noticed he never strayed far from the firelight. You traveling alone, Mr. Callahan, she asked, partly to fill the silence and partly from genuine curiosity. Usually, he said, adjusting the pot over the flames. Heading down from Montana. Got work waiting at a ranch near Cheyenne. What kind of work? Horse breaking, mostly. Some cattle work when needed. He glanced up at her. You know horses, ma'am. A little. She caught herself, remembering Mrs. Harwick's warning. I helped with them back home. Kansas, he guessed, and she nodded. Can hear it in your voice. Spent a winter there once. Good people. Knox returned to the fire, positioning himself between Cora and Asa. My bride needs rest. We have a long day tomorrow. I'm not tired, Cora said quietly. You will be, Knox replied, and there was something in his tone that made her stomach clench. Asa poured coffee into tin cups, handing one to Cora first, then offering one to Knox, who refused with a sharp gesture. The coffee was strong and bitter, but the warmth was welcome as the temperature dropped. That clearing I mentioned, Asa said after a while. There's a good spot for setting up a tent. Canvas walls help keep the heat in. We don't have a tent, Cora admitted. Knox shot her a look that could have curdled milk. We won't need one. We'll make do with the wagon. Wagon's tilted pretty bad. Asa observed. Be hard to sleep comfortable. He stood, brushing off his pants. Got an extra tent in my pack. Small, but it'll keep the wind off. We don't need— Knox started. I'll take it, Cora interrupted, standing as well. She was tired of being spoken for. If Mr. Callahan is kind enough to offer, I accept. Asa nodded and headed for his horse. Knox grabbed Cora's arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to show possession. You're making a fool of yourself, he hissed low, taking charity from a stranger. What will people say? People aren't here, Cora replied, pulling her arm free. And I'd rather be a warm fool than a proud corpse. Asa returned with a rolled canvas tent and wooden stakes. He selected a flat spot near the fire, but not too close, and began setting up with practiced efficiency. Cora watched, memorizing the process, while Knox stood rigid with barely contained fury. There, Asa said when finished. It was indeed small, barely tall enough to sit up in, but it looked sturdy and clean. Should keep you warm enough. I'll keep the fire going through the night. Where will you sleep? Cora asked. He gestured toward a large pine tree. Under there. Done it plenty of times before. In the cold. I've got a good bedroll. Buffalo hide. He met her eyes. I'll be close enough if you need anything. But I won't come near that tent unless you call for me. The weight of his words settled over the camp. Knox's face darkened further, understanding the implication. She won't be needing anything from you, Knox said coldly. I'll be sharing that tent with my bride. No, Cora said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. Not tonight. We haven't been properly married yet. It wouldn't be right. You became mine the moment your father lost that hand of cards. Knox said, I became promised to you. Cora corrected. There's a difference. Asa said nothing, but he moved slightly, positioning himself so Cora was no longer backed against the canyon wall. The fire crackled between them, sparks rising into the darkening sky. Ma'am's right. Asa finally said, not proper without words said in front of God and witnesses. Don't presume to lecture me about propriety. Knox snarled. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know enough, Asa replied calmly. Know you're a man traveling with a lady who isn't your wife yet. Know that draws certain conclusions if folks hear about it. The threat was subtle, but clear. Knox's reputation back at Pine Ridge Station mattered to him. Being seen as a man who couldn't wait for proper ceremonies would hurt his standing. Fine, Knox spat. But come tomorrow, things will be different. He stalked off toward the wagon. Cora released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Asa added more wood to the fire, then stepped back. I'll be right there, he said, pointing to the pine tree. You need anything water, more wood for the fire, or if he didn't finish. But she understood. Just call out. Why? Cora asked suddenly. Why are you doing this? Asa was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Had a sister once, he said finally. She got promised to a man she didn't choose. Wasn't nobody there to make sure she was treated right? He looked up at her. Can't change the past, but I can make sure you get one night to decide if this is really what you want. He touched his hat brim again and walked to his bedroll under the pine, settling down with his back against the trunk. From there, he could see both the tent and the wagon where Knox had retreated. Cora stood alone by the fire, looking at the small tent that suddenly seemed like a sanctuary. One night to decide, as if she had any real choice in the matter. But still, the gesture mattered. Someone had seen her as a person worthy of protection, not just property to be transferred. She crawled into the tent, keeping her knife close. Through the canvas walls, she could see the orange glow of the fire and the solid shadow of Asa Callahan keeping watch. For the first time since leaving Kansas, Cora felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Thin as morning frost and just as likely to disappear with the sun, but there all the same. Outside, the fire crackled and popped, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the rising moon. The fire had burned low when Cora first stirred, awakened by the cold seeping through the canvas walls. Through the tent flap, she could see the embers glowing like tiny red eyes in the darkness. Then she saw him, Asa Callahan, still sitting against the pine tree, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. He hadn't moved. Hours must have passed. Yet he remained at his post, keeping watch as promised. As she watched, he rose quietly and added wood to the fire. coaxing it back to life with practiced patience. The flames caught, casting dancing shadows across the canyon walls. Knox was snoring in the wagon, the sound carrying clearly in the still night air. But Cora couldn't find sleep again. The ground was hard beneath her, and her mind wouldn't quiet. Tomorrow, Emmett would return with help. Tomorrow, they would continue to Knox's ranch. Tomorrow, she would become his wife in every way that mattered. She must have made some sound, because Asa turned toward the tent. He didn't approach, just stood by the fire, waiting. After a moment's hesitation, Cora wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and emerged from the tent. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ground's harder than I expected," she admitted, moving closer to the fire's warmth. "Here." He retrieved a thick blanket from his saddlebags and spread it on a flat rock near the fire. "Sit a spell. Sometimes the stars help." Cora sat carefully, maintaining proper distance between them. The blanket smelled of wood smoke and leather. Above them, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like spilled flour on a dark tablecloth. "Never seen stars like this in Kansas," she said softly. "Mountains make everything clearer," Asa replied, settling back against his tree. "Air's thinner up here, less between you and heaven." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Cora found herself studying him in the flickering light. His face was weathered, but not old, maybe 30. 32 at most. There was a scar through his left eyebrow, and his hands bore the marks of hard work. "Your sister," she ventured carefully. "What happened to her?" Asa was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried old pain worn smooth by time. "She died. First winter after her marriage. Doctor said it was fever, but..." He picked up a stick and poked at the fire. "Fever don't usually leave bruises." "I'm sorry." "Her name was Grace. Tall like you, hair about the same color. Used to laugh at everything, even my terrible jokes." He looked up at the stars. "She was 17 when our father promised her to settle a debt." "Sound familiar?" Cora's throat tightened. "Very familiar." "I was up in the territories when it happened, breaking horses for the army. By the time I got word and rode home, she was already in the ground." He tossed the stick into the fire. "Promised myself I'd never stand by and watch it happen again." "Is that why you're out here looking for people like me to save?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "No, ma'am, I really do have work in Cheyenne. Meeting you was just providence, maybe, or dumb luck. And if Knox challenges you, he's not a man who likes being denied. I've faced worse than Jebediah Knox." Asa's voice held no boast, just fact. "Question is, what do you want come morning? You've got choices to make." "What choices?" Cora laughed, but it came out bitter. "I'm bought and paid for. My father made sure of that." "Your father sold a debt, not a person. You're not cattle to be branded and penned." "Tell that to Knox." "I'm telling it to you." He leaned forward, firelight catching his green eyes. "You could walk away. Right now. I'd take you back to Pine Ridge, or Cheyenne, or wherever you want to go. Find work as a nurse, yes. I figured that out. Way you looked at my hands, checking for injury. Way you asked about the water first, thinking practical. And live on what I have $3 to my name. $3 in skills. That's more than most folks start with out here." Cora pulled her shawl tighter. "And what would you get out of it? Men don't help women for free." "Maybe I'm tired of seeing good people ground down by bad circumstances." He stood, brushing off his pants. "Or maybe I just think everyone deserves one person in their life who asks what they want instead of telling them." He walked to his horse and returned with another blanket, this one lined with fur. "Getting colder. This'll help." He set it near the tent entrance, not handing it to her directly. "I'll be right here, Miss Arlington. Nothing and nobody gets to that tent without going through me." "Why should I trust you? I don't even know you." "You shouldn't," he said simply. Trust is earned, not given. But ask yourself this: have I done anything tonight except offer help and keep my distance? Have I asked for anything in return? He had a point. Knox had grabbed her arm, spoken of his rights, treated her like property from the moment they met. Asa had offered water, food, shelter, protection, and stayed back unless invited closer. "What's in Cheyenne?" she asked, changing the subject. "Ranch called the Double Bar 7. They've got a string of Mustangs need breaking before winter." He returned to his spot by the pine. Good outfit, fair wages, decent bunkhouse. Owner's wife even started a school for the ranch children. Sounds nice. It's honest work. He pulled his hat low over his eyes, settling in for the remaining hours until dawn. "Get some rest, Miss Arlington. Morning comes early in the mountains." Cora returned to the tent, wrapping herself in the fur-lined blanket. It was incredibly warm, and she found herself wondering how much such a thing cost, that he would loan it so freely to a stranger. Sleep came easier this time, and she dozed fitfully until the first pale light of dawn touched the canyon walls. When she emerged from the tent, Asa already had coffee brewing and was cooking something in a cast-iron pan. "Biscuits," he explained, seeing her surprise. "Nothing fancy, but they'll fill your stomach." Knox emerged from the wagon looking rumpled and angry. He glared at the domestic scene, Asa cooking, Cora warming herself by the fire with undisguised fury. "You overreach yourself, Callahan," he growled. "Just making breakfast," Asa replied mildly. "Long ride ahead for everyone." They ate in tense silence, Cora aware of Knox's eyes following her every movement. The biscuits were better than expected, light and flaky despite being cooked over an open fire. She wondered where a horse wrangler had learned to cook like this. The sun was fully up when they heard horses approaching. Emmett appeared around the canyon bend, leading a spare horse and accompanied by 2 men from Pine Ridge. "Got the parts," he called out cheerfully, then seemed to sense the tension in the camp. "Everything all right here?" "Fine," Knox said curtly. "Fix the wagon. We've wasted enough time." As the men worked on repairs, Asa quietly broke down the tent and packed his gear. Cora watched him prepare to leave with an unexpected sense of loss. In a few hours, she'd continue to Knox's ranch and whatever waited there. "Miss Arlington," Asa said quietly, leading his horse over while Knox supervised the repairs. "That offer stands, now or later. You find yourself needing help. You send word to the Double Bar 7 in Cheyenne. I'll come." "Why would you do that?" He adjusted his saddle, checking the straps with careful attention. "My sister used to say that kindness was like planting seeds. You never know which ones will grow or when you'll need the shade." He looked at her directly. "Besides, something tells me you're stronger than you know. Sometimes folks just need reminding of that." Knox noticed them talking and strode over. "Callahan, you're done here. Move along." Asa touched his hat brim to Cora. "Ma'am, safe travels." He mounted in one smooth motion and looked down at Knox. "You've got precious cargo there. Man would be a fool not to treat it right." "Are you threatening me?" "Just observing." Asa turned his horse toward the trail. "World's getting smaller out here. Stories travel fast. How a man treats his wife says a lot about his character." He rode off without looking back, disappearing around the canyon bend. Cora felt something cold settle in her stomach as her one ally vanished from sight. "Interesting fellow," Emmett commented, testing the repaired wheel. "Heard of him before. They say he's got a reputation for—" "Nobody cares what they say," Knox interrupted. "Is the wagon ready?" "Yes, sir. Good as we can make it." Knox turned to Cora. "Get in. We've got miles to cover." She climbed into the wagon, acutely aware of how different this felt from yesterday. The brief respite was over. Reality crashed back like a cold wind. As they rolled out of the canyon, Cora looked back once at the clearing where the tent had stood, where a stranger had kept watch all night asking nothing in return. The fire pit was cold now, but she could still see the marks in the earth where he'd sat against the tree. "Stop looking back," Knox ordered from his horse. "Your life's ahead of you now, not behind." But Cora kept the image in her mind, firelight on a kind face, green eyes that saw her as a person, hands that offered help without taking payment. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to in whatever darkness lay ahead. The wagon rolled on, carrying her toward a future she hadn't chosen. But now she knew something she hadn't known yesterday. There were still good men in the world, men who understood that protection meant standing guard outside the tent, not forcing their way in. It was a small comfort, but on this hard road, she would take whatever comfort she could find. Somewhere behind them, beyond the canyon's mouth, Asa Callahan rode toward Cheyenne, and somewhere in Cora's heart, a tiny seed of hope took root. She might be promised to Knox, might be riding toward his ranch and his bed, but she was not alone in the world. Someone had seen her. Someone had stood guard. Someone had asked what she wanted. For now, that would have to be enough. The morning mist clung to the ground as Cora stood at the edge of the stream, filling her water bucket. 2 days had passed since the canyon. 2 days of bone-jarring travel through increasingly rough country. Now they were camped again, this time in a meadow surrounded by lodgepole pines, waiting for one of Knox's ranch hands to meet them with fresh horses. Knox had grown more irritable with each passing hour, snapping at Emmett, cursing the muddy trails, and watching Cora with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She'd taken to finding small tasks, gathering water, collecting kindling, anything to put distance between them. "You're dawdling," Knox called from the camp. "Water doesn't take that long to fetch." Cora hefted the bucket and started back, her boots squelching in the marshy ground near the stream. The mountains rose all around them now, peaks shrouded in low clouds that promised rain before nightfall. As she entered the camp, she saw Knox had laid out his bedroll near the wagon, staking his claim to the space. "We'll reach the ranch by tomorrow noon," he announced. "I've sent word ahead. The preacher will be waiting." Preacher Cora set down the water bucket carefully. "For the ceremony, what did you think, woman, that I'd take you to my bed without proper vows?" His smile was cold. "I'm a respectable man. We do things right at the K-Bar Ranch." Cora said nothing, busying herself with preparing the noon meal from their dwindling supplies. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, and she forced them steady. Tomorrow, in less than 24 hours, she would be married to this man who looked at her like she was livestock he'd purchased at auction. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made both of them look up, but instead of Knox's ranch hand, a familiar figure emerged from the tree line. Asa Callahan rode into the clearing, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Knox's face darkened to the color of thunderclouds. "You following us?" "Callahan." "Same trail to Cheyenne goes this way," Asa replied calmly, dismounting with easy grace. "Public road, last I checked." "This is harassment. I'll have the law on you." "For using a public trail," Asa began unloading his mule, seemingly unconcerned with Knox's threats. "Afternoon, Miss Arlington. Hope your journey's been comfortable." "Comfortable enough," Cora managed, aware of Knox's eyes burning into her. Asa made his own camp on the far side of the clearing, methodical and unhurried. He tended his animals first, checking their hooves and rubbing them down, before setting up his simple shelter, a lean-to made of canvas and rope between 2 trees. "You'll move along," Knox ordered. "This clearing's taken." "Plenty of room for all of us," Asa replied, gathering wood for his fire. "Unless you're planning to use the whole meadow for something." The 2 men stared at each other across the space, tension crackling like lightning before a storm. Emmett, who'd been tending the wagon horses, cleared his throat nervously. "I'm going to scout up the trail a bit," the driver announced. "Check for washouts after last week's rain." He hurried away, clearly wanting no part of whatever was building between the 2 men. Asa got his fire going and set up his cook pot, every movement calm and deliberate. From his supplies, He produced fresh meat wrapped in cloth venison by the look of it, and vegetables that must have come from some homestead along the way. "Shot a deer this morning," he said conversationally, though he addressed the words to the air rather than anyone specific. "Too much meat for one man. Shame to waste it." Cora's stomach rumbled. They'd been living on hardtack and dried beans for days. The smell of fresh meat cooking made her mouth water. "We don't need your charity," Knox snapped. "Wasn't offering you any," Asa replied. He looked at Cora. "Ma'am, would you care for some venison, got wild onions too? And some potatoes from the widow Morrison's garden." She traded them for fixing her fence. Before Knox could object, Cora stood. "I'd be grateful for some vegetables to add to our pot. We can share our coffee and trade." "No trade necessary, but I appreciate the offer." Asa cut a generous portion of meat and wrapped it with several potatoes and onions in a clean cloth. He walked halfway between the camps and set it on a flat rock, then retreated. Cora retrieved the bundle, ignoring Knox's furious silence. She'd deal with his anger later. Right now, the thought of real food overrode her caution. As she cooked, the two camps settled into an uneasy truce. Asa tended his own meal while Knox sat rigid by their fire, hand never straying far from his pistol. The smell of roasting venison filled the clearing, mixing with the pine scent and the threat of rain. "Storm coming," Asa observed, studying the darkening sky. "Might want to secure your gear." As if his words had summoned it, the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within minutes, the drops became a steady drizzle, then a proper mountain rain. Cora hurried to get their supplies under the wagon while Knox cursed the weather. "There's room under my lean-to," Asa called out. "Better than getting soaked." "We'll manage," Knox snarled. But the rain was coming harder now, driving sideways with the mountain wind behind it. Cora pulled her shawl over her head, but it was already soaked through. The temperature was dropping fast, and she could see her breath misting in the air. Their fire sputtered and died despite Knox's efforts to shield it. Without a word, Asa appeared at their camp with an armload of pre-cut wood and a piece of pitched canvas. Working quickly, he helped them rig a shelter over their fire pit, his movements efficient despite the driving rain. Within minutes, they had protection and the possibility of warmth again. "Thank you," Cora said through chattering teeth. Asa nodded and returned to his own camp, where his lean-to was keeping his fire burning merrily. Cora noticed he'd positioned it perfectly to deflect the wind and rain, the mark of someone who'd spent many nights in the wilderness. The storm raged for hours. Knox huddled miserably under their makeshift shelter, complaining about the cold, the wet, the delay this would cause. Cora tried to keep the fire going, but the wood was damp and her hands were numb. A movement caught her eye. Asa was heating something over his fire, a pot of water. He poured it into a leather bottle, wrapped it in cloth, and walked through the rain to their camp. "For warmth," he said simply, handing it to Cora. "Help with the cold." She clutched the heated bottle gratefully, feeling warmth seep back into her frozen fingers. "Mr. Callahan, Storm should pass by midnight," he interrupted gently. "I'll keep watch for flooding. Stream can rise fast in weather like this." He was gone before Knox could voice the objection forming on his lips. Cora held the warm bottle close, wondering at a man who would venture into a storm to bring comfort to someone else's promised bride. The rain did break near midnight, just as Asa had predicted. The clouds parted to reveal a scatter of stars and a half-moon that painted the wet meadow silver. Cora emerged from the shelter, needing to stretch her cramped muscles and escape Knox's oppressive presence. Asa was by the stream, checking its level by moonlight. He straightened when he saw her approach. "Can't sleep. Too cold. Too many thoughts." She stood beside him, watching the water rush past, swollen with rainwater. "You knew this storm was coming. That's why you made camp here, in this protected spot." "Weather talks if you know how to listen," he said. "Clouds, wind patterns, how the animals act, all signs." You could have ridden on found better shelter. He was quiet for a moment. Could have, but you stayed. Seemed like the thing to do. He picked up a stick and tested the water's depth. Stream's high but not dangerous. Should be down by morning. Mr. Callahan Asa, why are you really here? He turned to look at her in the moonlight. His green eyes were serious, almost sad. You ever see a wild horse get broke? Miss Arlington? No. Some folks do it with force, ropes and spurs and breaking the spirit until there's nothing left but obedience. Works, I suppose. Gets you a horse that'll carry a saddle. He tossed the stick into the rushing water. But I've always preferred the other way. Patience, trust. Showing them that partnership's better than force. Takes longer, but you end up with a horse that'll give you its heart, not just its back. I'm not a horse. Mr. Callahan. No, ma'am, you're not. He looked back toward the camp where Knox's snores carried on the night air. You're a woman with a mind of her own, heading toward a man who thinks wives should be broken like broncos. And that sits wrong with me. What do you expect me to do? I have no money, no family who wants me, nowhere to go. There's always somewhere to go. Question is whether you're ready to take that step. Cora wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold again. And go where do what I've seen, what happens to women alone in the territories. It's not pretty. The Double Bar 7 needs a cook. Mrs. Patterson, who runs the main house, has been asking for help. She's particular about who she hires, but a woman who can read and write, who knows medicine. He shrugged. Might be worth talking to her. Knox would come after me. Maybe, but the Double Bar 7 takes care of its own. And Knox is just one man with a medium-sized ranch. He's not as powerful as he wants you to think. A splash in the stream made them both turn. A deer had come to drink, unaware or unconcerned with their presence. They watched in silence as it picked its way carefully along the bank, moonlight catching on its wet coat. Beautiful, Cora whispered. Free, Asa corrected softly. Nobody owns that deer. It goes where it wants, when it wants, answers to nothing but its own nature. The deer raised its head, seemed to look right at them, then bounded away into the forest with a flash of white tail. I should get back, Cora said, before Knox wakes and finds me gone. Miss Arlington, Asa said as she turned to go. Tomorrow you'll reach the K-Bar. Once you're there, it gets harder to leave. Man's got ranch hands, isolation, legal marriage to hold you, but right now, on this trail, you've still got choices. What are you suggesting? Nothing improper, just facts. Come morning, when we break camp, the trail splits about 3 miles up. Right goes to the K-Bar Ranch, left goes to Cheyenne. It's your choice which way your horse turns. Knox would never let me. Knox can't stop you, not legally. You're not married yet, whatever he thinks. And I'll be riding to Cheyenne myself. Coincidence if we happen to take the same trail. Cora studied his face in the moonlight. You'd risk Knox's anger for a stranger. Already have, haven't I? He smiled slightly. Besides, you're not exactly a stranger anymore, and I've faced worse than Jebediah Knox's temper. She left him by the stream and returned to camp, mind whirling. The warm bottle had gone cold, but she held it anyway, thinking of the man who'd brought it through the storm. Knox stirred when she settled back under the shelter, but didn't wake. 3 miles, a split in the trail. Right to Knox's ranch and a life of being owned. Left to uncertainty, but also to freedom. The choice seemed impossible and inevitable all at once. She dozed fitfully until dawn, dreams full of wild horses and rushing water. When she woke, Asa was already up. His camp packed and his animals ready. He worked quietly, efficiently, like a man who'd done this thousands of times. Knox woke surly and demanding, ordering her to pack quickly. Want to make the ranch by noon. Got things to do before the ceremony tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Asa mounted his horse and touched his hat to them. Safe travels, he said, then added quietly, Both trails lead somewhere. Miss Arlington, just depends on where you want to go. He rode out ahead of them, disappearing around a bend in the trail. Knox spat in the dirt. Good riddance. Man's got too many ideas about things that don't concern him. Cora said nothing, busy with her own thoughts. 3 miles, a choice. A man who'd kept watch in the rain versus one who saw her as property. Security versus uncertainty. The known versus the possible. 3 miles to decide the rest of her life. The morning sun broke through the remaining clouds, painting the wet forest in shades of gold and green. Somewhere up ahead, Asa Callahan rode toward his own destination, leaving the choice entirely in her hands. 3 miles, right or left, captivity or freedom. Cora mounted her horse and followed Knox onto the trail, her mother's knife heavy in her satchel and her mind lighter than it had been in weeks. She had 3 miles to decide who she wanted to be. The K-Bar Ranch sprawled across the valley like a small kingdom, its log buildings dark against the autumn grass. Cora's stomach tightened as they rode through the main gate, passing under an iron arch with Knox's brand worked into the metal. She'd made her choice at the fork, turned right instead of left, followed Knox instead of freedom. The coward's choice, she told herself. But $3 and a knife weren't enough to start a new life, no matter what Asa Callahan believed. Ranch hands stopped their work to stare as the small procession entered the compound. Cora counted at least a dozen men, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to something less pleasant. No women in sight, not even a cook or laundress. "Welcome to your new home," Knox said with satisfaction. 40,000 acres of the finest grazing land in Wyoming. 3,000 head of cattle, more being added every season. The main house sat apart from the other building, 2 stories of hewn logs with real glass windows and a stone chimney. It might have been handsome if not for the air of neglect weeds growing against the walls. A shutter hanging crooked, dirt clouding the windows. "Needs a woman's touch," Knox said, following her gaze. "Maria kept it nice, but she's been gone 2 years now." Maria, his first wife, the one who understood her duties. A thin man emerged from the house, dressed in black with a white collar the preacher Knox had mentioned. He descended the porch steps with careful dignity, Bible clutched in his hands. "Reverend Blackwood," Knox greeted him. "This is Miss Arlington." The Reverend's eyes swept over Cora, taking in her travel-stained dress and wind-tangled hair. "We should proceed quickly. I have other appointments." "Let me clean up first," Cora said. "Surely there's time." The Reverend wrote out special. Knox interrupted. "We won't keep him waiting." He dismounted and held up his hand to help her down, his grip firm on her arm. "Besides, the Lord don't care about fancy dresses." And so, 3 days after meeting Jebediah Knox for the first time, Cora found herself standing in his dusty parlor, repeating vows that felt like chains. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. No flowers, no music, no joy. Just words that bound her to a man she barely knew, while his ranch hands crowded the doorway to watch. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Blackwood intoned. Knox's kiss was possessive, claiming rather than celebrating. His hands gripped her shoulders hard enough to bruise, and she tasted tobacco and something sour on his breath. The watching men chuckled and made comments she pretended not to hear. "So, Mrs. Knox," the Reverend said when it was done, "may God bless your union." He left immediately after, and the ranch hands dispersed to their work, leaving Cora alone with her new husband in the dim parlor. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through dirty windows. "I'll show you the house," Knox said. "You'll want to know your duties." He led her through rooms that spoke of long neglect furniture covered in dust, curtains moth-eaten, floors that hadn't seen polish in years. The kitchen was worst of all, grease-blackened and smelling of rancid fat. "The hands have been cooking for themselves," Knox explained. "But that's your job now. 3 meals a day, washing on Mondays, mending when needed." For how many men? 15 regular hands. More during roundup. You'll manage. Cora stared at the enormous stove, the pile of dirty dishes, the barrels of flour and beans that would need transforming into meals for a small army. In Kansas, she'd cooked for her family of 4. This was something else entirely. "Where do I sleep?" she asked quietly. Knox's smile made her skin crawl. "Upstairs. Our room. I'll show you." The bedroom dominated the second floor, containing a massive bed with carved posts, a wardrobe, and little else. Like everything in the house, it needed cleaning, but Knox didn't seem to notice the dust or the musty smell. "You'll want to rest before dinner," he said, moving closer. "It's been a long journey." "I should start cooking. The men will be hungry." "They can wait." His hands reached for her, and Cora forced herself not to step back. This was her life now. She'd chosen this. But as Knox pulled her toward the bed, a commotion erupted outside, horses whinnying, men shouting. Knox cursed and went to the window. "What now?" He yanked open the sash and leaned out. "What's all this noise about?" "Ryder coming in. Someone called back. Says he's got business with you." Knox cursed again. "I'll be back," he told Cora, then strode from the room. She followed him to the window and looked out. A lone rider was entering the compound, sitting easy in the saddle despite the hostile reception from Knox's men. Even from this distance, she recognized the broad shoulders and the way he wore his hat. Asa Callahan had come to the K-Bar ranch. Cora flew down the stairs and out onto the porch just as Knox reached the rider. Asa hadn't dismounted, staying on his horse as men circled him with hands on their weapons. "Callahan," Knox snarled. "You've got nerve showing up here." "Afternoon." "Knox, Mrs. Knox." Asa touched his hat to her, polite as always. "Came to return something." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a book, her mother's Bible. "This fell out during the wagon trouble. Thought the lady might want it back." Cora's hand flew to her satchel. In the chaos of the past days, she hadn't noticed the Bible missing. It must have fallen when her bag spilled that first day. "Could have left it in town," Knox said suspiciously. "Could have, but it looked important. Has family names written inside." Asa held it out, not to Knox, but toward Cora. "Your family, ma'am. Figured you'd want to keep that close." She stepped forward, ignoring Knox's warning look. When she took the Bible, Asa's fingers brushed hers briefly. There was a folded paper tucked inside the front cover that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," she managed. "Also came to say I won't be taking that job at the Double Bar 7 after all." Asa continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Got a better offer up in Montana. Heading out today?" "Good," Knox spat. "And don't come back." "Hadn't planned on it." Asa gathered his reins, preparing to leave. Then he looked directly at Cora. "You ever need anything, ma'am, anything at all, folks at the Double Bar 7 know how to reach me. Mrs. Patterson especially. Fine woman. Always willing to help other women in need." The message was clear despite the careful words. He was leaving, but not abandoning her. There was still a lifeline if she needed it. "She won't be needing help from anyone," Knox said coldly. "She's my wife now." "Of course." Asa touched his hat again. "Congratulations on your marriage. Hope you both get everything you deserve." He wheeled his horse and rode out, back straight, not hurrying despite the hostile eyes following him. Cora clutched the Bible to her chest, feeling the hidden paper burn like a coal against her palms. "Get inside," Knox ordered. "And give me that book." "It's my mother's Bible," she protested. "You're my wife. What's yours is mine." He held out his hand, waiting. Cora had no choice but to surrender it. Knox flipped through the pages, found the paper, and read it with darkening expression. Then he crumpled it and tossed it into the dirt. "Get inside," he repeated. "Time you learned your place." She retrieved the paper when he turned away, smoothing it out to read Asa's brief message. Mrs. Patterson. Double bar 7. She's expecting you. A.C. Then Knox's hand clamped on her arm, dragging her back to the house. The bedroom door slammed shut behind them, and Cora understood with crystal clarity what she'd chosen at that fork in the road. But the paper in her pocket felt like hope. That night, after Knox had claimed his rights with rough hands and no tenderness, Cora lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her body ached, her spirit felt crushed, but her mind was working furiously. She'd made one choice at the crossroads, but Asa had shown her it didn't have to be the last choice she ever made. Downstairs, she could hear the ranch hands talking and laughing, probably discussing their new missus and what Knox was doing to her. Tomorrow she'd have to face them, cook for them, pretend this was normal. Tomorrow she'd start her life as Mrs. Knox. But tonight, she held onto a crumpled piece of paper and a name, Mrs. Patterson, a woman who helped other women in need. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light through the dirty windows. Somewhere out there, Asa Callahan rode toward Montana, leaving her to the fate she'd chosen. But he'd also left her something else, a reminder that there were still good people in the world, people who would help if she found the courage to ask. Beside her, Knox snored with the satisfaction of possession. Cora turned her face to the window, watching the stars wheel overhead, and began to plan. She'd chosen the ranch over the unknown, but that didn't mean she had to choose it forever. In the darkness, she whispered a prayer her mother had taught her, one about strength in trials and hope in despair. Then she closed her eyes and tried to sleep, the paper hidden in her fist like a promise. Tomorrow would be hard. The day after would be harder. But somewhere out there was a woman named Mrs. Patterson who helped women in need. And Cora May Knox was definitely a woman in need. The October wind cut sharp across the valley as Cora saddled the old mare in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 weeks had passed since her wedding. 3 weeks of cooking for rough men who leered at her, of Knox's nightly visits that left her bruised in body and spirit. 3 weeks of planning her escape. She'd hidden supplies bit by bit, hardtack wrapped in cloth, a water canteen filled from the well, matches stolen from the kitchen. Her mother's knife was back in her boot where it belonged. The crumpled paper with Mrs. Patterson's name lived in her bodice, pressed against her heart like a talisman. Knox was in town for the monthly cattle auction. Wouldn't return until tomorrow. The ranch hands were scattered across the range, moving the herd to winter pasture. Only old Samuel remained to watch the place, and he was sleeping off last night's whiskey in the bunkhouse. Now or never. Cora led the mare out quietly, wincing at every sound. Her body still ached from Knox's last assault. He'd been rougher than usual before leaving, as if marking his territory. But pain was nothing compared to the alternative of staying. She was halfway across the yard when a figure stepped out from the barn shadows. Her heart stopped. Going somewhere, Mrs. Knox. But it wasn't a ranch hand. Asa Callahan stood there in the moonlight, looking exactly as he had 3 weeks ago, down to the patient expression and the way his hand rested easy at his side. "You're supposed to be in Montana," she whispered. Funny thing about Montana, decided it could wait. He studied her packed saddlebags, her traveling clothes, the desperate determination in her eyes. "Though if I had to guess, you're not heading north." "I can't stay here." The words tumbled out in a rush. It's worse than I imagined, and getting worse each day." "I know." Something in his voice suggested he'd been watching, waiting. "Mrs. Patterson's expecting you. Sent me to make sure you got there safe." "How did you know I'd—" "Because I know what courage looks like when it's cornered. And you, Cora May, were never meant to be caged." He moved to his own horse, hidden behind the barn. "We should ride. Samuel won't sleep forever." They left the K-Bar Ranch as the first pale light touched the eastern mountains. 2 riders moving fast across the frost-silvered grass. Cora didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and any pursuit. Asa led them off the main trail onto a deer path through the pines, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and stone. "He'll come after me," Cora said when they finally slowed to rest the horses. "Let him try." Asa's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Man wants to complain his wife left him. He'll have to explain why. And there's folks at the Double Bar 7 who've heard stories about Knox and his first wife. Questions he won't want answered." They reached a small clearing as full daylight broke. Asa dismounted and immediately set about making a fire, giving Cora privacy to stretch her aching muscles and gather her composure. When she joined him by the flames, he handed her coffee without comment on the bruises visible at her collar. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Asa added wood to the fire, taking his time answering. "Told you about my sister Grace. What I didn't say was that I could have stopped it. Saw the signs, heard the warnings. But I was young and figured it wasn't my business. A man's marriage is private. People said, none of my concern. You were just her brother. You couldn't have... I was the only one who could have..." His green eyes were haunted. "Our parents were gone. I was all she had. And I failed her because I didn't want to make waves. Didn't want to challenge a man's rights." He looked at her directly. "I won't make that mistake again." They rode on through the morning, following hidden trails and creek beds. Asa seemed to know every shortcut, every safe crossing. By noon, they were miles from any route Knox might guess. "There," Asa pointed ahead. "That's the edge of Double Bar 7 land." The ranch sprawled before them, neat and prosperous. White painted fences marked the boundaries, and Cora could see cattle dotting the hillsides like scattered seeds. The buildings were well maintained, smoke rising cheerfully from multiple chimneys. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's safe," Asa corrected. "That's what matters." They rode through the main gate where a sign proclaimed Double Bar 7, established 1866. Ranch hands looked up from their work, but instead of hostile stares, Cora saw nods of welcome. Several men touched their hats respectfully. "Isa," a young boy ran out from the barn. "Mrs. Patterson said you'd be coming. She's got the room all ready and everything." The main house was painted white with green shutters, flowers still blooming in window boxes despite the late season. The door opened before they could knock, revealing a woman in her 50s with a silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. "You must be Cora," she said warmly, though her gaze lingered on the visible bruises. "I'm Helen Patterson. Come in, dear. You look like you could use a hot bath and a proper meal." Cora nearly cried at the simple kindness. "I don't have much money." "Nonsense. We'll discuss practical matters later. Right now, you need tending. Mrs." Patterson turned to Asa. "Thank you for bringing her safely." "Ma'am." He touched his hat, then looked at Cora. "You're in good hands now, Mrs. Patterson's helped other women start over. She knows what to do." "You're leaving." Cora felt oddly bereft. "Got horses to work, but I'll be around if needed." His eyes promised more than his words. "You're safe here. Cora, that's what matters." Mrs. Patterson led her inside to a world of clean floors and fresh bread smells. The house was warm and welcoming, with quilts on the chairs and books on the shelves. Other women moved through the rooms, a young girl setting the table, an older woman kneading dough in the kitchen. "We run a different kind of ranch here," Mrs. Patterson explained, leading Cora upstairs. "My husband believes in giving folks second chances. That includes women who need to start over." She opened a door to reveal a small but clean room with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt. "This is yours for as long as you need it." Cora sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. "Knox will come looking." "Let him look. He'll find you're under the protection of the Double Bar 7. My husband Tom has twice the men Knox does, and they're loyal to us. Besides," her eyes glinted with humor, I've got papers from a lawyer in Cheyenne about the legal particulars of abandonment. Amazing what a wife can claim when her husband fails to provide proper care and protection. You've done this before. 3 times. You'd be surprised how many women need help leaving bad situations. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her. Now, let's see about those bruises. I've got salve that'll help with healing. As gentle hands tended her wounds, Cora finally let the tears fall. Not from pain, but from relief. She'd escaped. She was safe. The nightmare was over. There now, Mrs. Patterson soothed. You cry all you need. Then we'll get you fed and rested. Tomorrow we'll talk about work. I need help with the household and the books. You can read and write. Yes, and I know nursing. Even better. We've got families on the ranch, children who get sick, men who get injured. A woman with medical knowledge would be a blessing. She squeezed Cora's hand. You're not the first woman to run from a bad marriage, dear, and you won't be the last, but here, you get to write a new story. That evening, Cora joined the household for dinner. Mrs. Patterson, her husband Tom, a large, quiet man with gentle eyes, 2 other women who'd found refuge here, and several ranch hands, including Asa. The conversation was easy, respectful. No one stared at her bruises or asked painful questions. Heard Knox was asking around town about his missing wife. Tom Patterson said casually, Sheriff Daniels told him a woman has the right to leave if she's mistreated. Knox didn't like that much. He'll come here, Cora said quietly. Hope he does. Tom replied, I've got a few questions for a man who thinks wives are property to be used and discarded. After dinner, Cora found herself on the porch with Asa, watching the sun set behind the mountains. They stood in comfortable silence, the evening air crisp with coming winter. Thank you, she said finally. For everything. For the tent that first night, for the Bible, for not giving up on me even when I chose wrong. You chose what seemed safe, Asa corrected. Can't fault someone for that. Takes time to trust that freedom's worth the risk. What happens now? Now you heal, work, build a life that's yours. He glanced at her sideways. I'll be around. Got that job I mentioned. Breaking horses for the Double Bar 7. Turns out Montana can wait indefinitely. Asa, she struggled for words. I'm still married, legally, and even if I wasn't, I'm not. I need time. I know. His voice was gentle. I'm not asking for anything. Cora, just want to see you safe and happy. The rest, he shrugged. The rest can wait for whenever you're ready, or never, if that's what you choose. A door slammed in the distance, and they both turned to see a rider approaching fast. Cora's heart jumped, but Asa put a calming hand on her arm. That's just Jake from the north pasture, probably coming for dinner. He studied her tense posture. It'll take time before you stop jumping at shadows. That's normal. Does it get easier? Every day, until one morning you wake up and realize you're not afraid anymore. Just free. They went back inside, where warmth and light waited. Mrs. Patterson had laid out fabric on the table, discussing with the other women about making Cora some new clothes. Can't have you wearing reminders of that place, she said firmly. That night, in her small, clean room with a door she could lock from the inside, Cora lay in bed without fear for the first time in weeks. Outside her window, she could see light from the bunkhouse where Asa and the other hands lived. Not guarding her, she didn't need guarding here, but present, available, a reminder that good men existed. She thought about Knox, probably raging at his empty house, demanding his rights to ears that no longer had to listen. She thought about the choice she'd almost been too scared to make. Mostly, she thought about tomorrow, about work that would be hers to choose, wages that would be hers to keep, a life that would be hers to build. For the first time in months, maybe years, Cora May Arlington Knox smiled in the darkness. She'd been promised to a rancher, sold like cattle to pay a debt, but she'd found something better than ownership or obligation. She'd found freedom, And in this place of second chances, with people who saw her worth beyond her value as property, she would learn to be herself again. The fire in the stove below crackled softly, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang of tomorrow's possibilities. The November storm hit without warning, turning the world white in minutes. Cora had been in the barn checking on a sick calf when the temperature plummeted and the wind began howling like a wounded animal. By the time she reached the barn door, she could barely see the house through the driving snow. "Best wait it out," Asa said from behind her. She hadn't heard him enter, but she'd grown used to his quiet ways in the month since her arrival at the Double Bar 7. This kind of storm can turn deadly fast. He was right. Already the path between barn and house had disappeared under swirling white. Cora pulled her shawl tighter, grateful she'd worn her heavy boots. The barn was warm enough with the animals, but she worried about being trapped away from the house. "Got a stove in the tack room," Asa said, reading her concern. "We can hold up there until it passes." The tack room was small but cozy, walls lined with bridles and saddles that gleamed with careful maintenance. Asa got the pot-bellied stove going while Cora found a horse blanket to wrap around her shoulders. Soon, the little room was warm enough to forget the storm raging outside. "Reminds me of another storm," she said, settling onto a wooden crate. "That night in the canyon." "You were scared then," Asa observed, adding wood to the stove. "Not now." He was right. A month of safety had begun to heal more than just the physical bruises. She could meet men's eyes again, speak up in conversations, walk alone without constantly looking over her shoulder. Mrs. Patterson said it was good progress. But healing isn't a straight line, she'd warned. Some days will be harder than others. "Tell me about Grace," Cora said suddenly. "If you don't mind, I'd like to know about her." Asa was quiet for a long moment, staring at the stove's orange glow. Then he pulled up another crate and sat down, his green eyes distant with memory. "She was 2 years older than me. Should have seen her ride like she was born on horseback. Pa used to say she was wasted as a girl. Should have been born a boy to carry on the ranch." He smiled sadly. Made her mad as fire when he said that. Girls can ranch just as good. She'd say, and she was right. "What happened to the ranch?" "Lost it after she died. Pa had been gone 2 years by then, Ma longer. I couldn't run it alone, not with the grief eating at me. Sold it for less than it was worth and started drifting. Been drifting ever since. Until..." He stopped abruptly. Until I found a reason to stop." He met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "Grace would have liked you. Same steel in your spine, even when folks try to break it." The wind howled harder, rattling the small window. Cora pulled the blanket tighter. "I'm not brave. A brave woman wouldn't have gone to Knox's ranch at all. Brave doesn't mean fearless. Means doing what needs done despite the fear." He poked at the fire. "Grace was brave right up until the end. Fought back every time. Never gave up hoping things would change. Her husband hated that about her. Called her willful, disobedient. Like Knox called me. Men like that got a whole vocabulary for women who won't break." His voice carried old anger. "But breaking a person doesn't make you strong, just makes you cruel." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm. The tack room felt like a small island of warmth in a cold world. Safe, protected. Cora found herself studying Asa's profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun, the way his hands stayed gentle even when the rest of him went tense. "My sister wrote me once," he said suddenly. "Asa," she wrote, "I'm like a bird in a cage too small. Every day I beat my wings against the bars, and every day they get more broken. But I keep trying because what else is there a bird's got to fly, even if it dies trying." Cora's throat tightened. "When did she write that?" "Week before she died. Letter reached me too late to do anything but ride home for the funeral." He stood abruptly, checking the window. "Storm's getting worse. We'll be here a while." "I don't mind." Cora said softly, and she didn't. This small room with its horse leather smell and warm stove felt safer than any locked bedroom ever had. Cora! He turned back to her, something shifting in his expression. There's something I need to say. Been putting it off, but... The door burst open in a crash of wind and snow. Tom Patterson stumbled in, covered in white from head to toe. Thank God you're both here, he gasped. We got trouble. Knox is at the main gate with 12 men. Says he's come for his wife and won't leave without her. Cora's blood turned to ice. She'd known this day would come, but somehow had let herself believe it might not, that Knox would let her go, find another woman to torment. Foolish hope. How many men we got? Asa asked, already reaching for his coat. 8 here, but most are in the south pasture. This storm caught everyone scattered. Tom looked at Cora. Helen says to tell you not to worry. Says she's handled worse than Jebediah Knox. But Cora was already standing. I won't hide while others fight my battles. Nobody's fighting if we can help it, Tom said. But Knox seems liquored up and mean. Got some hard cases with him, too. Men I wouldn't trust in daylight, much less a storm. They made their way to the house, heads down against the driving snow. Cora could hear shouting even over the wind Knox's voice, slurred with drink and rage. Through the front windows, she could see him on his horse at the gate, his men spread out behind him like wolves. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door, calm as always despite the crisis. I've sent young Jamie out the back to town for the sheriff, but it'll be an hour or more in this weather. I'll talk to him, Tom said, checking the rifle by the door. No, Cora surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. He came for me. I'll talk to him. Absolutely not, Asa said immediately. He's right, Mrs. Patterson agreed. You're under our protection. And I'm grateful. But hiding makes me look guilty, like I've done something wrong by leaving. Cora moved to the window, studying her husband through the glass. Even from here, she could see he'd been drinking heavily. He wants to shame me, make a scene. Maybe if I face him, he'll see there's nothing here for him anymore. You don't know what he might do, Asa warned. I know exactly what he might do. I lived with it for 3 weeks. She turned from the window. But I won't live in fear of it anymore. Before anyone could stop her, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The wind nearly knocked her back, but she stood firm, head high despite the snow stinging her face. Jebediah, she called out. Knox's head snapped up, even through the storm. She could see his eyes narrow with rage and something else satisfaction. Maybe the predator who'd cornered his prey. There's my wayward wife, he slurred. Come to collect what's mine. I'm not yours anymore. I left. It's done. Marriage is forever. Woman, you spoke vows. Vows that promised honor and protection. You broke them first. Knox spat into the snow. Get on my horse, now, or I'll come get you myself. You'll have to go through us first, Tom Patterson said, stepping onto the porch with his rifle visible but not raised. Asa appeared on Cora's other side, hand resting easy on his pistol. Look at that, Knox sneered. My wife's got herself protectors. Tell me, Callahan, she keeping you warm at night, that why you sniff around her like a dog? Watch your tongue, Asa said quietly. Or what you'll shoot me for claiming my legal property? Knox laughed ugly. I know the law. She's mine until death do us part. The law also says a man can't beat his wife, Mrs. Patterson said, joining them on the porch. Can't treat her worse than he'd treat his horse. I've got a lawyer in Cheyenne who's very interested in your interpretation of husbandly rights. You've got nothing. Just a woman who couldn't handle ranch life. Ran off to play victim. I've got a doctor's statement about her injuries. Mrs. Patterson continued calmly. Witnesses to her condition when she arrived, and 3 other women who've shared interesting stories about their time at the K-Bar Ranch. That stopped Knox cold. What other women? Did you think Cora was the first to run, or that they all disappeared into the wilderness, Mrs.? Patterson's smile was sharp as winter wind. Some found their way here. Some had stories about your first wife, too. Stories the sheriff might find interesting if pushed. Knox's men shifted uneasily behind him. Whatever they'd been promised, investigating a possible murder wasn't part of it. One of them, a younger man with nervous eyes, actually backed his horse up a step. "You threatening me?" Knox snarled. "Stating facts. Here's another one you're trespassing on Double Bar 7 land. In a blizzard, with armed men. Some might call that attempted robbery, or worse." The wind howled between them, carrying snow and tension in equal measure. Cora watched her husband's face cycle through rage, calculation, and finally a kind of cunning that made her stomach turn. "Fine," he said at last. "Keep her. But she's still my wife legal. She can't remarry, can't own property, can't sign contracts without my say-so." His eyes found Cora's. "You'll come crawling back when you realize what that means. And when you do, things will be different. I'll make sure of that." He wheeled his horse around, his men following with obvious relief. But at the gate, he turned back one more time. "This isn't over," he shouted. "What's mine stays mine." Then they were gone, swallowed by the storm. Cora's knees nearly buckled, but Asa's hand on her elbow kept her upright. "Inside," he said gently. "You're freezing." They gathered in the kitchen where Mrs. Patterson poured hot coffee with hands that trembled only slightly. "Well," she said, "that was unpleasant." "He'll be back," Cora said dully. "He's not wrong about the law." "The law's changing," Tom interrupted. "Slowly, but changing. Wyoming's talking about giving women the vote, property rights, things Knox won't want to see happen. And until then, you're safe here." Mrs. Patterson squeezed her hand. "That man's a bully and a coward. He came with 12 men to collect one woman. That tells you everything about his character." But Cora barely heard her. She was watching Asa, who stood by the window staring out at the storm. His jaw was tight, hands clenched at his sides. She'd never seen him truly angry before. "Asa." He turned, and she saw murder in his eyes before he blinked it away. "I'm fine. Just thinking." "Don't think too hard," Tom warned. "Knox isn't worth hanging for." "Some men need killing," Asa said flatly. "Maybe, but not by you and not today." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, let's check the stock before this storm gets worse." The men left, and Mrs. Patterson busied herself with dinner preparations. But Cora stood frozen by the window, watching the snow erase all sign of Knox's visit. He'd come for her, faced her down, and she'd stood up to him. It wasn't much, maybe, but it was something. A small victory in a long war. "You did well," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "Took courage to face him like that." "I was terrified." "Of course you were. Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what needs done despite it," Cora finished. "Asa said the same thing." Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. "That young man says a lot of wise things. Shame he can't say the one thing that matters most." "What's that?" But the older woman just shook her head and handed her an apron. "Come help with dinner. The men will be hungry when they get back. And idle hands make worried minds." They worked in companionable silence, the storm raging outside but unable to touch the warmth within. And Cora found herself thinking not of Knox's threats or the legal chains that still bound her, but of green eyes dark with protective anger and hands gentle enough to tend wounded creatures. The war with Knox wasn't over, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was fighting it alone. And that, more than any legal document, felt like freedom. The bell above the mercantile door chimed as Cora entered, her basket of medicinal herbs carefully balanced on her arm. 6 months had transformed her from a frightened runaway into a respected member of the small town near the Double Bar 7. People nodded to her on the street, called her Miss Cora despite her married status, and sought her out for remedies and advice. "Morning, Miss Cora." Samuel Briggs, the shopkeeper, greeted her warmly. "Got that willow bark you ordered from Denver? Wonderful. The Pattersons' youngest has been running fevers again." She set her basket on the counter, pulling out bundled herbs. "I've brought sage and chamomile to trade, plus some of that calendula salve you wanted for your wife's hands." "You're a blessing to this town," Samuel said, weighing the herbs. "Don't know what we did before you came." The door chimed again, and conversation in the store died. Cora didn't need to turn to know who'd entered. The sudden tension told her everything. She kept sorting herbs, refusing to acknowledge Knox's presence. Well, my wife, playing shopkeeper." His voice carried that familiar mix of ownership and disdain. "How the mighty have fallen." "Mr. Knox," Samuel said stiffly. "This is a respectable establishment. If you're not here to buy—" "I'm here to talk to my wife." Knox moved closer, boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Alone." "I have nothing to say to you," Cora said quietly, still not turning around. "No, how about explaining why you're selling goods under my name? Any money you make belongs to me, legally speaking." "The herbs are payment for medical services," Samuel interjected. "No money changes hands, just neighborly trade." Knox's laugh was ugly. "Clever, but we both know she can't keep hiding behind technicalities forever." The shop door chimed again. This time, Cora did turn, relief flooding through her as Asa entered. He took in the scene with one glance, then moved to examine a display of ammunition with studied casualness. "Callahan," Knox spat. "Should have known you'd show up. Can't seem to stay away from my wife." "Just need some cartridges," Asa said mildly. "Though I do enjoy watching a man make a fool of himself in public. Free entertainment." Knox's hand dropped to his gun. "You looking for trouble?" "Nope, but I'm prepared for it." Asa selected a box of ammunition, his own hand casual near his holster. "Sam, you got any of that good tobacco from Virginia?" The tension stretched taut as piano wire. Other customers had quietly slipped out, leaving just the four of them in the suddenly cramped space. Cora found herself calculating distances to the door, to Asa, to the shotgun she knew Samuel kept under the counter. "This isn't over," Knox finally said to Cora. "You can't hide forever. And when the Pattersons get tired of harboring a runaway wife, where will you go?" "Anywhere but back to you," Cora said, finding her voice at last. Knox's face darkened, but before he could respond, the door burst open. Young Jamie Patterson skidded to a halt, eyes wide with urgency. "Miss Cora, you're needed quick. There's been an accident at the sawmill, Mr. Henderson's caught his arm in the blade." Cora grabbed her basket without hesitation. "Samuel, I need clean cloth, lots of it, and that bottle of grain alcohol from the back." "I'll drive you," Asa said, already moving. "Now wait just a minute," Knox started. "A man's dying," Cora snapped, whirling on him with fire in her eyes. "I don't have time for your games." She pushed past him, Asa right behind her. They commandeered Samuel's wagon, Asa driving while Cora prepared what supplies she had. The sawmill was 2 miles out, and she could hear the commotion before they arrived. Men shouting, someone screaming in pain. The scene was chaotic. Bill Henderson lay on the ground, his right arm mangled and bleeding heavily. His fellow workers stood around helplessly, most looking ready to be sick. "Move back," Cora commanded, dropping to her knees beside the injured man. The wound was bad. The saw had caught him just below the elbow, tearing through muscle and into bone. "Asa, I need you to hold him still. Someone get me hot water and more cloth." She worked with the efficiency born of battlefield training, though she'd never told anyone about those dark days nursing wounded soldiers. First pressure to stop the bleeding, then assessment of damage, The arm couldn't be saved, that was clear immediately. "Bill," she said firmly, looking into his pain-glazed eyes, "the arm has to come off. Do you understand?" He nodded weakly. "Just make it stop hurting." "I will." She looked up at the gathered men. "I need 3 strong men to hold him, and someone needs to ride for the doctor, though I can't wait for him to arrive." "You're going to cut?" Asa asked quietly. "I have to. He'll bleed out otherwise." She met his eyes. "I've done it before, during the war." Understanding flickered across his face. Without another word, he positioned himself at Henderson's shoulders, nodding to 2 other men to take the legs. Cora pulled out her mother's knife, grateful she'd kept it sharp. "Someone bring whiskey," she ordered, "as much as he can drink." What followed was 20 minutes of controlled chaos. Cora worked with steady hands, drawing on memories she'd tried to forget: young men screaming on hospital tables, the metallic smell of blood, the terrible necessity of causing pain to save lives. But her hands remembered what to do. When it was over, Henderson had fainted a mercy and his arm was gone just below the elbow. Cora had tied off the blood vessels, sewn what she could, and bandaged the stump with the last of the clean cloth. "He needs to be kept warm and still," she instructed the mill foreman. "The doctor can check my work when he arrives, but the immediate danger is past." She stood on shaking legs, suddenly aware of the blood soaking her dress and hands. The crowd of mill workers stared at her with something approaching awe. "You saved his life," someone said. "Maybe the next few days will tell." She swayed slightly, exhaustion hitting like a wave. Asa's arm came around her waist, steady and supporting. "Come on, let's get you home." She let him lead her to the wagon, too tired to protest the impropriety of his touch. It was only when they were driving back that she realized Knox had followed them to the mill. He stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with an expression she couldn't read. "He saw," she said unnecessarily. "Let him look," Asa replied. "Maybe he'll finally understand what he threw away." They drove in silence for a while, the adrenaline fading to leave Cora hollow and shaking. She'd saved a life today, proven her worth in front of the whole town, but all she could think about was the weight of Knox's stare. "You were amazing," Asa said suddenly. "I've seen army surgeons with less steady hands." "My uncle was a doctor. I helped him during the war when I was barely 16. The words came out without planning. "So much blood. So many boys who looked like my brothers." "Is that why you became a nurse?" "I wanted to help people without all the cutting." She laughed bitterly. "But sometimes cutting is the only way to save someone." "Like leaving a bad marriage." She looked at him, startled by the analogy. "Yes, I suppose so." They reached the double bar 7 as the sun touched the western peaks. Mrs. Patterson was waiting on the porch. Having heard the news already, gossip traveled fast in a small community. "Into the house with you," she ordered. "Bath, clean clothes, and something to eat. The hero work is done for today." But as Cora climbed the porch steps, she saw dust on the road riders approaching. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead figure. "He followed us," she said tiredly. Knox dismounted at the gate, but this time he came alone. There was something different about his manner, less blustering anger, more calculating purpose. "That was quite a display at the mill." He called out, "My wife, the surgeon!" "What do you want, Jebediah?" Cora asked, too exhausted for fear. To talk civilized-like, he spread his hands, showing he wasn't armed. "5 minutes, that's all." "Mrs. Patterson started to protest, but Cora held up a hand. "Fine, say your piece." Knox approached the porch but didn't climb the steps. "You've made yourself quite indispensable around here. The town hero, the angel of mercy." "Get to the point." "The point is, I've been thinking, a wife with medical skills could be useful. Come back, and I'll give you a room for nursing work. You can tend the ranch hands, maybe take town patients. I'll even pay you a wage well. Keep it in trust, since legally your money is mine anyway." "Why?" Cora asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why would you want me back after all this?" "Because you're mine," he said simply. "And I don't like losing what's mine, but I'm willing to negotiate, make allowances for your peculiar nature." "My peculiar nature?" "Your need to be useful, your pride. I can work with that, if you learn to work with me." Cora stared at him, finally understanding. He didn't want her, he wanted to win, to prove he could bring her to heel, even if it meant pretending to compromise. "No," she said quietly. "Think about it. You can't stay here forever, and you can't remarry while I live. What kind of future is that?" "A free one," Asa said from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. "Which is more than you ever offered?" Knox's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Callahan." "Maybe not, but I'll make it my concern if you keep harassing her." "Harassing my own wife?" Knox laughed. "That's rich. Tell me, Callahan, how long you planning to moon after another man's woman must be frustrating, wanting what you can't have." "Stop it," Cora said sharply. "Both of you, Jebediah. I'm not coming back. Not for any terms. Find another wife if you need one so badly." "Can't, not while you live. Abandonment takes 7 years to prove in court. Until then, I'm as trapped as you are." His smile was cruel. "Unless you're suggesting something more permanent." The threat hung in the air like smoke. "Mrs." Patterson stepped forward. "That's enough. You've said your piece. Now get off our land." Knox tipped his hat mockingly. "Ladies, Callahan, I'll be seeing you around." He mounted and rode off, but his presence lingered like a bad smell. "Inside, Mrs." Patterson ordered. "All of you. We need to discuss this." They gathered in the kitchen, Cora, Asa, the Pattersons, and Helen, one of the other women who'd found refuge at the ranch. Tom Patterson's face was grim. "He's escalating," Tom said. That last bit sounded like a threat. "Or trying to goad us into something foolish." His wife added, "The man's not stupid. He knows we're protecting her." "For how long?" Cora asked quietly. "He's right about one thing. I can't stay here forever. You've all been so kind, but I'm putting you at risk." "Nonsense." "Mrs." Patterson said firmly. "You're family now. We don't abandon family." "There might be another way," Helen said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I've been corresponding with my cousin in California. She says the laws are different there, more favorable to women, and far enough away that Knox wouldn't follow." "California's a long journey," Tom pointed out. "Dangerous for a woman alone." "I could escort her," Asa said immediately. "I've made the trip before." "That would be even more improper." "Mrs." Patterson said. "An unmarried man and a married woman traveling together." "Then we go in a group," Helen suggested. "I've been thinking of joining my cousin anyway. We could travel as a party, find others heading west." They discussed options late into the evening, but Cora barely heard them. Her mind kept returning to that moment at the sawmill, her hands steady and sure, saving a life while the town watched. She'd felt more herself in those bloody minutes than in years of trying to be the proper, submissive wife her father had wanted her to be. "I need to think," she said finally, standing. "It's been a long day." She went to her room, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she sat by the window, watching clouds drift across the stars. Somewhere out there, Knox was planning his next move, and somewhere else, California beckoned with its promise of different laws and new beginnings. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's Asa," came the quiet voice. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, hat in hand. "Wanted to check on you. Today was intense." "I'm all right. Just thinking." "About California. About everything." She gestured for him to come in. Propriety be damned. They'd crossed those bridges long ago. Did you mean it about escorting me west? I'd escort you to China if that's what it took to see you free. The words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them back. But it's your choice. Always your choice. Why? She asked for what felt like the 100th time. Why do you care so much what happens to me? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you know why. Cora. Known for months, I reckon. But you're not ready to hear it, and I'm not fool enough to say it while you're still bound to another man. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Asa. Don't. He held up a hand. Nothing needs saying right now. Just know that wherever you decide to go, you won't go alone. Not if you don't want to. He left before she could respond. Footsteps fading down the hallway. Cora stood in her doorway. One hand pressed to her chest where her heart was racing like a spooked horse. California, freedom, and maybe, eventually, something more. For the first time in months, the future looked like possibility instead of prison. She closed the door and returned to her window. But now she wasn't watching for threats in the darkness. Instead, she was looking west, toward mountains she'd never seen and a life she'd never dared to imagine. Tomorrow she'd give her answer. Tonight, she allowed herself to dream. The spring market day had brought everyone to town. Farmers with early vegetables, ranchers looking to buy and sell, families in their Sunday best despite it being Saturday. Cora moved through the crowd with her basket of remedies, stopping to talk with patients and friends she'd made over the winter months. Miss Cora, young Sally Henderson, ran up, braids flying. Papa wants to thank you again. Look. She held up a small wooden carving. He's learning to whittle with his left hand. Made this for you. Cora accepted the little bird, tears pricking her eyes. It's beautiful. Tell your father I'm proud of him. Bill Henderson had survived the amputation and adapted with remarkable spirit. His recovery had cemented Cora's reputation as a healer, bringing her more requests for help than she could handle. It felt good to be needed for her skills, not just her ability to cook and clean for ungrateful men. Quite the admirer you have there, a familiar voice said behind her. Cora's shoulders tensed. She'd managed to avoid knocks for nearly a month, but market day made encounters inevitable. She turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral. Jebediah. He looked different, thinner, less carefully groomed. His clothes were clean but wrinkled, like he'd been tending them himself. No warm greeting for your husband. What do you want? Can't a man speak to his wife at market? But the usual sneer was missing. He seemed tired, older. Actually, I came to propose something. I told you. Not that. He waved a hand impatiently. I mean a real proposal, a business arrangement. He glanced around, noting the curious stares. Might we speak privately? No. Cora stood her ground. Whatever you have to say it here. Knox's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. I need your medical skills. There's sickness at the ranch. 3 men down with fever. Getting worse. None of the remedies we've tried are working. Send for the doctor. Doc Morrison's away at Fort Laramie. Won't be back for a week. He shifted uncomfortably. These are good men. Cora, they don't deserve to die because of our difficulties. Cora studied him, looking for the trap, but all she saw was genuine worry. What kind of fever? Started with chills and aching. Now they're burning up, seeing things that aren't there. Tom Baxter keeps calling for his mother. She's been dead 10 years. It sounded like the severe influenza that had swept through the territory last year. Cora had treated several cases successfully, but it required constant care and the right medicines. I have willow bark and elderflower, she said, thinking aloud. But they'd need careful nursing, cool baths, fluids every hour, someone to watch for complications. Then come. The word came out strangled, like it physically hurt him to ask. I'll pay your normal rates. You can leave when they're well. You must be desperate to ask. I am. The admission seemed to surprise them both. Look, I know you hate me. Maybe you've got cause, but these men rode for my brand loyally. I won't let them die for my pride. Before Cora could respond, another voice cut through the market noise. She's not going anywhere with you. Asa materialized from the crowd, positioning himself slightly in front of Cora. His hand rested casual on his gun belt, but his eyes were hard as flint. This is none of your business, Callahan, Knox said wearily. Cora's safety is my business. I'm not going to hurt her. I need her help. Like you needed her help with cooking and cleaning and warming your bed. Asa's voice carried dangerous edges. We all know how that turned out. Knox's face flushed. That was different. Was it? The two men faced off in the middle of the market, tension crackling between them. People had stopped pretending not to watch, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Stop it, Cora said sharply. Both of you. She stepped between them, addressing Knox. If I come, I set the terms. I bring my own supplies and keep my own hours. I sleep in a locked room, and someone from the Double Bar 7 checks on me daily. Fine. Knox agreed immediately. And when the men are well, we discuss ending this marriage properly. No tricks, no threats. A civilized agreement between adults. Knox's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to give you a divorce? I'm asking you to admit this isn't working for either of us. She kept her voice steady, aware of their audience. You need a wife who wants to be there. I need a life where I'm more than property. The market had gone silent, everyone straining to hear. This was better than any traveling show real drama playing out before their eyes. Knox looked around at the watching faces, then back to Cora. Something shifted in his expression: defeat. Maybe, or just exhaustion. We'll discuss it, he said finally. After you've seen to the men. Cora, no, Asa said urgently. You can't trust him. I'm not trusting him. I'm trusting myself. She touched his arm gently. And I'm asking you to trust me too. Asa searched her face, then nodded slowly. I'll be by the ranch tomorrow to check on you, if anything seems wrong. I know. She turned back to Knox. I need an hour to gather supplies, and I'm bringing Helen with me. She's studying nursing. Whatever you need, Knox said, already turning away. Just hurry. The crowd parted to let him pass, then erupted in whispered conversations. Cora found herself surrounded by well-meaning advice and warnings. Don't go, dear, Mrs., Morrison urged. That man's dangerous. She's right. Mr., Briggs added. What if it's a trap? But Sally Henderson tugged on Cora's skirt. You'll help them, won't you, like you helped Papa? Yes, Cora said simply, because that's what I do. An hour later, she and Helen rode toward the K-Bar Ranch. Medical supplies packed carefully in saddlebags. Asa and Tom Patterson rode escort, both armed and watchful. The familiar trail brought back memories Cora would rather forget, but she pushed them aside. There were sick men who needed help. The rest could wait. The ranch looked worse than she remembered. Weeds grew thicker. Fences needed mending, and an air of neglect hung over everything. Knox met them at the main house, looking haggard. They're in the bunkhouse, he said without preamble. Tom Baxter, Jim Collins, and young Pete Morrison. Pete's the worst been out of his head since yesterday. Cora pushed past him, Helen close behind. The bunkhouse smelled of fever sweat and fear. 3 men lay on cots, one thrashing weakly in delirium. The other ranch hands stood around helplessly. Out, Cora ordered. Everyone except Helen. Open those windows, we need fresh air, and get water boiling. Lots of it. She went to work immediately, assessing each patient with quick, sure hands. It was definitely influenza. But Pete Morrison showed signs of complications. His breathing was labored, suggesting the infection had reached his lungs. This one might need bleeding, Helen said quietly, checking Pete's pulse. No, Cora was already mixing medicines. Bleeding weakens them further. We'll try steam inhalation and chest poultices first. They worked through the afternoon and into evening. Cora showed Helen how to prepare the willow bark tea, how to apply cool compresses to bring down fever, how to coax fluids into barely conscious men. Knox stayed out of their way, but she could feel him watching from the doorway. "Why are you helping us?" one of the conscious ranch hands asked weakly. "After what we—" "Because you're sick," Cora said simply, helping him sip the medicinal tea. "The rest doesn't matter right now." By nightfall, Tom Baxter's fever had broken and Jim Collins was sleeping naturally. Pete Morrison remained critical but stable. Cora was exhausted but satisfied they'd made good progress. "You should rest," Helen suggested. "I can watch them for a few hours." In a bit, Cora stepped outside for fresh air and found Knox sitting on the bunkhouse steps, head in his hands. "Pete's going to make it," she said quietly. "Probably." "You don't know what this means," Knox said without looking up. "These men, they're all I've got left. Half my hands quit over the winter. Couldn't pay them proper." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out running a ranch alone is harder than I thought." "Maria used to help with the accounts, didn't she?" Cora guessed. "And probably more." "She did everything. Kept the books, managed the supplies, knew all the men's families." He finally looked up, and Cora was shocked to see tears in his eyes. "I killed her, Cora, not with my hands, but I killed her spirit until her body gave up too, and I was fixing to do the same to you." Cora sat down carefully, maintaining distance between them. "Why tell me this?" "Because I'm tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending I'm something I'm not." He scrubbed at his face. "My father beat my mother every Saturday like clockwork. Told me that's how you keep women in line. I swore I'd be different, but—" He shrugged helplessly. "Guess we become what we know. You could have chosen differently." "Could I? When did I ever see different?" He looked at her with something almost like pleading. "You did, though. Saw different. Chose different. That's why you couldn't stay." They sat in silence as stars emerged overhead. Inside the bunkhouse, Helen hummed softly to the patients. It was strangely peaceful. This moment of honesty between them. "I'll give you the divorce," Knox said suddenly. "Soon as the territorial judge comes through, desertion, or whatever grounds work quickest." Cora's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you were right. I need a wife who wants to be here, and you—" He almost smiled. "You need to be free to save people. It's what you're meant for." Jebediah. "I won't make it easy on Callahan, though," he added with a ghost of his old spite. "Man's been sniffing around you since day one. Let him work for it. That's between Asa and me. If anything ever—" "Oh, there'll be something. Man doesn't look at a woman like that unless he's planning a future." Knox stood, suddenly awkward. "I had Maria's room cleaned for you. Locks on the inside. Helen can have the room next door." "Thank you." "No, thank you for coming when you didn't have to. For seeing my men as people worth saving, even if I'm not." He walked away before she could respond. Cora sat on the steps a while longer, processing this unexpected turn. Inside, one of the men coughed, and she rose to tend him. There was still work to do, lives to save. But for the first time in months, she felt the chains around her loosening. Freedom was no longer a distant dream, but a coming reality. And with it, possibilities she'd barely dared imagine. Asa would come tomorrow to check on her. She wondered what he'd think of Knox's promise. Wondered if he'd wait for her to be legally free before speaking what lived in his eyes every time he looked at her. Wondered if she wanted him to wait. But tonight, there were sick men who needed care. Tomorrow could bring its own revelations. She had learned to take life one day, one choice, one kindness at a time. It had brought her this far. It would take her the rest of the way home, wherever that turned out to be. The territorial judge arrived on a Tuesday morning in late May, his black coat dusty from the long ride. Word spread through town like wildfire. Judge Harrison was hearing cases at the courthouse, including several divorce petitions. Cora stood at the window of Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, watching the road with hands that wouldn't quite stay still. "Stop fretting, Mrs. Patterson said gently. "Your papers are in order. Knox signed them willingly. It'll be done by noon." "I know." But knowing didn't stop the butterflies in her stomach. 6 months had passed since that night at the K-Bar when Knox promised her freedom. He'd kept his word, even helping prepare the legal documents citing abandonment and incompatibility. The man who'd once claimed to own her was letting her go. A knock at the door made them both turn. Asa stood on the porch, hat in hand, dressed in his best clothes, a dark suit she'd only seen him wear twice before. "Thought you might want company at the courthouse," he offered. "Thank you." Cora smoothed her blue dress, the same one she'd worn to marry Knox. It seemed fitting to wear it to unmarry him, too. "I'm ready." The courthouse was packed. Divorce was still rare enough to draw spectators, especially when it involved known figures like Jebediah Knox. Cora kept her eyes forward as she walked down the aisle, aware of the whispers following her. Knox was already there, sitting alone on one side of the room. He looked better than he had in months, cleaner, steadier, like sobriety was slowly taking hold. He nodded when he saw her, the gesture respectful rather than mocking. "All rise for Judge Harrison," the bailiff called. The proceedings were surprisingly brief. The judge reviewed the papers, asked a few questions about the grounds for divorce, confirmed that both parties agreed to the dissolution. Knox stood when asked, his voice clear. "I failed in my duties as a husband," he stated. "Mrs. Knox deserves better than I could provide. I release her from our vows freely." "Mrs. Knox," the judge addressed her. "Do you concur with this petition?" "I do, Your Honor." "Then, by the power vested in me, by the Wyoming Territory, I declare this marriage dissolved. Mrs. He checked his papers. "Miss Arlington, you are restored to your unmarried state with all rights therein." The gavel came down with finality. Just like that, after all the pain and struggle, she was free. Cora stood on shaking legs, hardly believing it was real. Knox approached her, and Asa tensed beside her, but the former husband merely extended his hand. "I hope you find happiness, Cora," Knox said quietly. "Real happiness, the kind Maria and I never had." "I hope you find peace, Jebediah," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. He left without another word, walking out of her life as suddenly as he'd entered it. Cora watched him go, feeling not triumph but a strange sort of pity. He was as much a victim of his upbringing as she'd been of her father's debts. "Cora," Asa's voice was gentle. "You all right?" "I'm free," she said wonderingly. "Actually, legally free." "You've been free since the day you rode away from the K-Bar," he corrected. "This just makes it official." They walked out of the courthouse into brilliant spring sunshine. The town looked different, somehow brighter, full of possibility. People called out congratulations, and Samuel Briggs insisted on giving her a bolt of fine cloth to start your new life proper. But Asa steered her away from the crowd, down to the quiet spot by the creek where wildflowers grew thick. They'd come here often over the winter months, talking about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the words that wanted to be said. "So," he said, picking a stem of grass to fiddle with. "What now?" "Helen's still planning that trip to California. She asked if I want to go along." Cora sat on a fallen log, spreading her skirts carefully. "There's opportunities there for a woman with medical training." "That's a fine plan." But his voice was too casual, his focus too intent on the grass stem. "Or," she continued, "Mrs. Patterson mentioned the town needs a proper clinic. Says Doc Morrison's getting too old to handle everything alone. Might be nice to have a real place to work, not just kitchen tables and bunkhouses." "That's a fine plan, too." "Asa Callahan, look at me." He did, those green eyes full of hope and fear in equal measure. She'd seen him face down angry husbands and charging horses without flinching, but now he looked terrified. "Ask me," she said softly. "Ask you what?" "Whatever you've been wanting to ask since that first night by the canyon, I'm free now. There's nothing stopping you." He set down the grass stem and moved closer, taking her hands in his work-roughened ones. "Cora May Arlington, I've loved you since the moment you looked at me over that campfire and asked for water instead of promises. I've waited and watched and tried to be patient, but patience is about worn through." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me? Not because you need protection or saving, but because I can't imagine any tomorrow that doesn't have you in it." "Yes," she said simply, and watched joy transform his face. But, I want to wait. Not long. I need to be myself for a while. To remember who I am when I'm not running from something or someone." "I've waited this long," Asa said, squeezing her hands. "I can wait a little longer, just so long as I know you're mine eventually." "I was yours from that first night," she admitted. "When you lit that fire and sat outside my tent, I just didn't know it yet." He kissed her then, sweet and gentle and full of promise. Not claiming like Knox's kisses, but offering himself as much as asking for her. "Well," a voice said dryly, "took you too long enough." They broke apart to find Mrs. Patterson watching with undisguised satisfaction. "Half the town's got bets on when you'd finally get around to it. I just won $5 from Samuel Briggs." "Mrs. Patterson," Cora protested, blushing. "Oh, hush. Like everyone hasn't been watching you two dance around each other for months." She smiled warmly. "I'm happy for you both. When's the wedding?" "When she's ready," Asa said firmly. "Could be next month, could be next year. Her choice." "Good answer, Mrs." Patterson linked her arm through Cora's. "Now come on. This calls for cake and celebration. The whole Double Bar 7's been waiting for this news." As they walked back toward town, Cora found herself thinking about circles and journeys. She'd started this path as property, traded to settle a gambling debt. She'd been broken down, built back up, found strength she didn't know she possessed. And through it all, there'd been a man willing to light fires and wait outside her tent. A man who saw her not as something to own, but as someone to cherish. A man patient enough to let her choose her own path, even when that path led away from him temporarily. "What are you thinking?" Asa asked, walking close beside her. "About fires," she said, "and choices, and how sometimes the best things come to those who wait outside the tent." He smiled, understanding perfectly. "Speaking of tents, I've been thinking, when we do get married, maybe we could spend our wedding night camping. Find a nice clearing, set up a tent, light a fire. And you'll wait outside," she teased. "Not that night," he said, heat in his voice that made her shiver pleasantly. "That night, you'll invite me in." "Yes," she agreed softly. "I will." They reached the Double Bar 7 to find it festooned with ribbons and wildflowers. The entire ranch had apparently been preparing for this moment, just waiting for the legal chains to drop away. There was music and dancing and more food than an army could eat. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Cora stood in the circle of Asa's arms and watched their communities celebrate. These people had taken her in, protected her, given her space to heal and grow. They'd become the family she'd never really had. "No regrets?" Asa asked quietly. "None." She turned in his arms to face him. "I choose this. Choose you. Choose us. Forever." "Forever." He spun her around, making her laugh with pure joy. Somewhere in the crowd, she caught sight of Helen, who raised her glass in a toast. Even California could wait when there was happiness like this to be found. Later, much later, when the party had wound down and the stars came out, Asa walked her to her door like he had every night for months, But this time, when he kissed her good night, it carried the promise of all their tomorrows. "I love you, Cora May Arlington," he said against her lips. "And I love you, Asa Callahan, the man who lit a fire and waited." She went inside, but not to sleep. Instead, she sat at her desk and opened her journal, wanting to capture this perfect day. Outside her window, she could see a small fire burning in the yard where Asa was helping clean up from the party. Still keeping watch, still patient, still hers. She smiled and began to write, "Today I chose my own path, and it led me home." The fire crackled softly in the night, a beacon of warmth and safety and love. And Cora May Arlington, soon to be Callahan, wrote her new story with her own hand, in her own words, on her own terms, just as it should be. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, resilience, and true love in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Cora and Asa's journey. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these authentic frontier stories. Until next time, partners.